Flashbulbs carved the air as the brand logo flickered behind the podium. Maya Reed said, "We will investigate everything." Her voice held, but the room smelled of blood. Reporters pressed forward like surf hitting a pier. Noah Park said, "Breathe, I'm here from the wings." A phone lit up with a headline that burned. Victor Hale said, "Pull the plug on distribution somewhere uptown." The board chair cleared her throat, and the cameras leaned in. Maya felt the floor tilt, like the city had moved an inch. She remembered nights shipping orders from a cramped kitchen. The memory cut bright, then dimmed under the hum of outrage. Someone shouted a number that sounded like a sentence. Lena Brooks said, "Let me handle comms, too fast, too smooth." Maya steadied the mic and tasted metal. She said, "Our customers come first." A boom arm swung close enough to count scratches. The logo failed again, and the room gasped. A red tally light glared like a verdict. Maya said, "We will make this right," and her hand trembled. Outside, rain began to drum on the glass. It felt like applause from a cruel sky. The studio apartment smelled like coffee and cardboard, and the radiator clicked like a stubborn metronome. Maya Reed said, "This label looks honest," and smoothed a craft sticker against a jar. Noah Park said, "Honest costs time, but it buys trust." He stacked boxes with a grin that tried to be brave. They had 6 shelves, 3 clients, and a calendar with too many empty days. Maya traced the brand mark and felt a small heat, like a pilot light. Grace Reed said, "You should take the safe job," from a speaker on the counter. Maya laughed, but her eyes dimmed. She turned the jar toward the window and studied the light pooling in amber. Noah said, "We can test at the flea market this weekend." The word weekend sounded rich, like a promise you could hold. The city beyond the glass moved without noticing them. Maya said, "If they feel what I felt, that first sample, we have a chance." Silence settled, tender and thin. She sealed the box, wrote a careful address, and drew a tiny star. Harold Quinn's office held the smell of books and cedar, and the city hummed below like a low chord. Harold Quinn said, "Brand is a promise you must keep on your worst day." Maya Reed said, "Then it must be simple enough to survive me." He smiled with the weary kindness of someone who had fallen and rebuilt. He drew circles on a yellow pad and mapped a path from need to story to touch. Maya watched the pencil like it was a compass. Noah Park said, "We can prototype in 2 weeks," and pushed forward a scrappy deck. Harold tapped the slide where the mission line lived, plain and stubborn. He said, "Never let this sentence become a slogan." The words rested in the room like a vow. Maya felt the window pull her toward a larger horizon. She said, "I want people to feel safe when they see our mark." Harold nodded, then cleared his throat. He said, "Safety is earned in inches and lost in seconds." The clock ticked once, very loud. The diner glowed like a postcard, and plates chimed in a rhythm that made the talk feel sharp. Grace Reed said, "You are burning daylight and chances." She stirred coffee that did not need more stirring. Maya Reed said, "I need to see how far this can go." The booth vinyl sighed under a shared weight. A waitress set pie down with a smile that offered truce. Grace said, "You had offers, real ones." Maya traced a fork line in the steam on the window. She said, "Those jobs felt like rooms without doors." Grace's eyes softened, then tightened again. She said, "A dream is not a plan." Maya breathed, counted to 5, and let the words pass through. She said, "I have a plan, and a friend who will hold me to it." Outside, a siren rose and thinned into the night. The pie cooled, and the coffee went cold. Grace said, "I just do not want you to drown." Maya said, "Then sit with me while I learn to swim." The bell over the door rang twice. They set up a folding table at the flea market, and the wind made the banner snap like a flag. Noah Park said, "If we sell 10, we celebrate." Maya Reed said, "If we sell 1, we learn." People drifted, curious, careful, then moved on. A child pointed and tugged a sleeve. A woman stopped, took a jar, and read the tiny story on the back. She said, "This feels considered," and placed cash on the tin. Maya thanked her and felt the ground steady under her shoes. Noah said, "One becomes 10 if we listen." They offered samples and listened to faces. A man said less sweet, and shrugged. Maya wrote it down like a gift. Clouds parted and poured pale light across the table. The banner stopped snapping and just breathed. Maya said, "We will remember today when the storm comes." Noah laughed and said, "Then let us build a roof." The wind carried the smell of pretzels and hope. The library smelled of ink and quiet wood, where afternoon light carved golden stripes across the desk. Harold Quinn said, "Ideas are seeds, but discipline makes them grow." Maya Reed said, "I keep fearing the soil is too shallow." Harold tapped his glasses against the page. He said, "Then you dig deeper, not wider." Maya studied the notepad where he had written 3 words: trust, value, voice. Noah Park leaned against the window and said, "We can work nights, test until the numbers tell us." Harold smiled with the patience of old storms. He said, "Do not confuse noise for growth. Choose silence when others shout." The clock chimed 3 times, and dust danced in the shaft of light. Maya said, "Then we build something quiet but undeniable." Harold nodded, a trace of pride hiding in his wrinkles. He said, "That is the only kind worth building." The city moved faintly outside, but here, time bent. Cardboard towers filled the apartment, and the air tasted like tape and ink. Maya Reed said, "Every label must feel like a handshake." She pressed the sticker against a jar, slow and firm. Noah Park said, "We'll miss dinner again." He smiled, but his eyes showed fatigue. Maya said, "Dinner can wait, trust cannot." The radiator clanked, and the night pressed against the glass. Boxes leaned at precarious angles, daring gravity. Grace Reed left another voicemail, her voice full of caution. Maya played it once, then muted the phone. Noah lifted a box, staggered, then laughed. He said, "One day we'll look back and laugh at this mess." Maya said, "Only if we win." She sealed the carton and wrote the address with deliberate strokes. The silence thickened, but it was stitched with hope. The cafe buzzed with steam and chatter as Samuel Price slid into the booth. Samuel Price said, "You're asking for money, so convince me it's not a gamble." Maya Reed said, "It's not gambling when the demand is written on faces." She placed jars on the table, labels catching the low light. Noah Park said, "We've tested them at markets, we have notes from real buyers." Samuel leaned back, skeptical, tapping his ring against porcelain. He said, "You're small fish in a storm." Maya said, "Small fish learn to swim under waves." The silence swelled, broken by the hiss of milk frothers. Samuel studied their eyes, searching for cracks. He said, "If I give you one chance, you cannot waste it." Maya met his stare, steady. She said, "We won't." The warehouse echoed with footsteps and the smell of dust. Lena Brooks said, "This place will eat your time before it pays back." Maya Reed said, "Then I'll teach it discipline." Noah Park wheeled in crates, breathless. Lena held the clipboard like a shield. She said, "Inventory can drown you if you let it." Maya bent, lifted a box, and winced but did not stop. She said, "It's the spine of our promise." Noah laughed through his sweat. He said, "At least the echo makes us sound busy." The cavern swallowed their words, but also carried them forward. Lena scribbled notes, her lips tight. The light through broken windows made stripes on the concrete, like prison bars and freedom at once. At the flea market again, a small crowd gathered, curious. Maya Reed said, "Smile, and let them feel we belong here." Noah Park handed samples, his laughter breaking the tension. A young mother said, "This is different," and bought 3 jars. Maya's hands shook as she made change. Noah whispered, "One becomes 10. The sunlight brightened, chasing off the chill. Grace Reed watched from a distance, uncertain, her lips pressed thin. She said, "They're not failing, but can they endure?" A teenager snapped a photo, tagging it online. Maya looked at Noah, both recognizing the weight of this moment. She said, "Today, the seed found soil." The ballroom glowed with chandeliers and power, a launch event brimming with cameras and rivals. Victor Hale said, "Competition is survival, and only giants endure." His smile carved sharp lines into his face. Maya Reed whispered to Noah Park, "He's already staking ground we barely touched." The crowd applauded as Victor's team unveiled a glossy product eerily similar to theirs. Noah said, "He copied your story and painted it in gold." Maya felt her chest tighten, the air suddenly heavy. Harold Quinn leaned close and said, "This is the wolf at your door. How you react defines the hunt." Victor raised a glass toward Maya with a smirk, daring her. The room clinked with crystal, but Maya heard only a drumbeat in her head. She said, "We'll answer, not with louder words but with truth." The applause swallowed her defiance, but her jaw held firm. The market smelled of asphalt and exhaust, as their booth stood almost ignored. Maya Reed said, "They walk by like we are invisible." A group of teens laughed at a competitor's flashy stall glowing with neon. "Maya, you try to enjoy our batteries firms." Noah Park muttered, "They're buying the noise, not the soul." A woman picked up a jar, glanced and returned it without speaking. Maya's chest burned. Grace Reed approached and said, "This is why I worried. Their shine swallows your honesty." Maya whispered, "Then we make honesty shine brighter." But her words cracked under the strain. The sky dimmed with clouds, and a sudden gust scattered flyers across the pavement. Noah ran to collect them, his hands shaking. Maya stared at the empty table, as silence pressed like failure. The small office felt tighter, with bills spread across the desk. Samuel Price said, "Numbers don't lie. At this rate you're out in 6 months." Maya Reed said, "Numbers don't measure resilience." Her hand trembled against the ledger. Noah Park said, "We can cut costs, run leaner." Samuel frowned, tapping the spreadsheet. He said, "Passion burns money faster than fire. Investors want proof, not poetry." Maya bit her lip until it hurt. Harold Quinn placed a hand on her shoulder and said, "Crisis is a crucible. If you break, you never deserve the ford." Maya said, "I will not break." The room fell quiet, heavy as stone. The family kitchen smelled of roast chicken, but the table felt like a courtroom. Grace Reed said, "You're draining yourself for nothing certain." Maya Reed said, "This is the only certainty I've ever felt." Grace tapped her fork, eyes wet but sharp. She said, "You can't eat certainty." Maya's breath caught, then steadied. She said, "I want a life I build, not one handed to me." Silence wrapped the table until the clock ticked too loudly. Noah Park cleared his throat and said, "She's right. I've seen the faces when people taste our work. That's proof." Grace looked at him, softening but still guarded. She whispered, "I just don't want her heart broken." Maya said, "Then help me mend it if it breaks." The office air was cold, silence broken only by keyboard clicks. Lena Brooks said, "Maybe partnership isn't the worst option." Maya Reed said, "You mean surrender." Lena's eyes flickered, evasive. She said, "I mean survival." Noah Park slammed a file shut. He said, "Selling out isn't survival, it's decay." Maya's chest ached, but she studied Lena's face, reading doubt in every line. Harold Quinn said, "Beware those who soften the ground before betrayal." Lena straightened her coat, her voice brittle. She said, "I'm looking out for us." Maya said, "Or for yourself." The room froze with that weight. Lena turned away, silent. The boardroom lights buzzed with sterile white heat, as silence weighed like stone. Samuel Price said, "If growth stalls, I withdraw support." His words cut sharper than any blade. Maya Reed said, "You believed when no one else did." Samuel leaned forward, unyielding. He said, "Belief must pay dividends." Noah Park slammed a binder shut and said, "Without us, you're investing in empty air." Samuel's jaw tightened as his gaze narrowed. Harold Quinn whispered, "He tests resolve, not numbers." Maya steadied her voice, though fear scraped her throat. She said, "We are not finished. We will not break." Samuel's silence burned longer than his threats, and the ticking clock filled the room like thunder. The office door clicked shut behind Lena Brooks, the sound too soft for the storm she carried. Lena Brooks said, "We cannot hold ground, not like this." Maya Reed said, "You've already chosen your path." Lena's eyes flashed, guilt flickering before pride smothered it. She said, "I chose survival. You chose suicide." Noah Park stepped closer, voice raw. He said, "You were family." Lena's lips trembled before hardening. She said, "Family doesn't pay rent." Harold Quinn sighed, the sound old as regret. Maya whispered, "You were the one I trusted most." Lena turned her face away, already gone in spirit. The skyline glowed under storm clouds as Victor Hale spoke on live television. Victor Hale said, "Integrity is nothing without results." His smirk spread across every screen. Maya Reed watched from a dim cafe corner, fists clenched. Noah Park said, "He's burying us with lies." Harold Quinn adjusted his glasses and said, "Let wolves howl. They reveal their hunger." Maya whispered, "But the world only hears the howl, not the truth." The television crowd applauded as Victor promised innovation he had stolen. A chill seeped through the cafe windows as Maya said, "We fight not with noise, but proof." Her voice shook, but her eyes burned. The warehouse echoed with chaos as crates toppled, papers scattered, and exhaustion gnawed at every breath. Noah Park said, "We're drowning, Maya." His shout cracked through the cavern. Maya Reed lifted a box despite trembling arms and said, "Then we learn to swim in storms." Lena Brooks' absence burned like a missing limb. Grace Reed arrived, her eyes wide with alarm. She said, "This is madness." Harold Quinn raised his cane, voice cutting steady. He said, "Pressure forges steel or shatters glass." Maya's knees buckled, but she forced herself up again. She whispered, "I will not shatter." The echo carried her vow like thunder. The apartment was silent except for the hum of the fridge, but Maya Reed felt louder silence inside. She said, "Maybe they were right. Maybe I was foolish." Noah Park dropped into the chair opposite, sweat still clinging from the warehouse. He said, "If foolish means fighting, then I'll be foolish with you." Grace Reed placed tea on the table, her eyes soft with sorrow. She said, "I don't understand this life you chase, but I see your fire." Harold Quinn's voice rasped low. He said, "Even the greatest stumble before standing tall." Maya closed her eyes, breath quivering, then opened them steady. She whispered, "Then tomorrow, I rise." The conference room reeked of betrayal as papers spilled across the table. Noah Park said she signed with him, Maya Tat. His voice cracked under the weight of truth. Maya Reed stared at the document, her breath hollow. Lena Brooks had carved her name beside Victor Hale's logo. Maya whispered, "She sold us for silver." Harold Quinn's jaw clenched. He said, "Trust once broken cannot be rebuilt, but it can be avenged with integrity." Grace Reed pressed her hands together. She said, "I warned you she was restless." Maya felt the world tilt. She said she was my friend, my partner. Noah shook his head, eyes burning. He said, "Now she is your enemy." The room fell into silence, but it was the silence of war being born. The old cafe corner smelled of burnt coffee and regret as Harold Quinn leaned forward. Harold Quinn said, "You must learn the pain of losing pieces of yourself." Maya Reed said, "What if the pieces are the best ones?" Harold's eyes softened. He said, "Then you build new ones, sharper and truer." Noah Park scribbled notes furiously. He said, "We redesign, cut waste, push harder." Grace Reed muttered, "You're asking her to bleed more when she's already torn." Harold shook his head. He said, No, I'm asking her to rise. Maya felt the words stitch into her chest, heavy but necessary. She whispered, I can rise, but not without scars. Harold said, scars prove survival. Wear them like armor. The apartment floor was scattered with sketches, failed labels, and empty cups. Maya Reed said, I thought I was too small, but maybe that's my strength. She picked up a torn design and smoothed it flat. Noah Park said small means we can turn fast. Adapt before they even notice. Grace Reed said, but at what cost to you? Maya looked at her raw hands, ink-stained and trembling. She whispered, at every cost except my soul. The radiator hissed like an exclamation. Noah said, then let's build new from ashes. Maya felt a fire stir again. She said, we will not die here. We will begin again. The words cut through the clutter, sharper than steel. Samuel Price leaned back in his leather chair, eyes sharp as knives. Samuel Price said, I don't return to sinking ships. Maya Reed said, then see us as fire, not water. He arched a brow, intrigued but skeptical. Noah Park slid forward a slim plan. He said, lean operations, sharper margins, we've cut the fat. Samuel tapped the page, lips thin. He said, you've been reckless before. Maya's voice steadied like stone. She said, we were reckless, now we are relentless. Samuel studied her, silence stretching long. Finally he said, one last gamble, don't waste it. Maya met his gaze and said, we won't. The rooftop air was sharp with winter as Grace Reed stood close. Grace Reed said, I never believed, but I see now you cannot stop. Maya Reed said, I don't need belief, I need understanding. Grace exhaled slowly, eyes softened. She said, then take my silence as trust. Noah Park leaned against the railing, exhaling steam in the cold air. He said, we've come this far, tomorrow we strike harder. Maya looked at the city glowing below. She whispered, we've been broken, betrayed, and burned. But this is the turning point. The wind whipped her hair as she said, they'll see us rise from the ashes. The auditorium pulsed with expectation, cameras circling like hawks. Victor Hale said, this is the age of giants, and only the strong will last. His smirk sharpened under the spotlight. Maya Reed stood at the edge of the stage, heart pounding like war drums. Noah Park whispered, he wants to crush you in front of them all. Maya said, then I'll bleed in front of them and still stand. Harold Quinn adjusted his cane, voice low. He said, strength isn't always loud. Let them see your silence bend into steel. Victor raised his glass toward her with venomous pride. The applause felt like thunderclouds ready to break. Maya stepped forward, eyes steady, and whispered, let the storm come. The negotiation table gleamed under cold lights as silence suffocated the air. Victor Hale said, sell, and you'll walk away with dignity. Maya Reed said, dignity isn't for sale. He smirked, leaning back. Noah Park's hands pressed against the table, veins taut. He said, we've come too far to bow. Samuel Price watched quietly, eyes narrowed with calculation. Harold Quinn's whisper echoed like a warning. He said, every empire is built in moments like this. Maya's voice rose with fire. She said, you stole my work, but you can't steal my will. The words slashed through the sterile air, leaving silence gasping. The small team huddled in the dim warehouse, the smell of dust and ink heavy in the air. Noah Park said, every one of us matters tonight. The silent observer, Alex Tran, lifted a crate and nodded without words. Maya Reed said, this brand lives because of hands like his. Grace Reed entered hesitantly, voice softer now. She said, you have more strength than I ever imagined. Maya's eyes brimmed with fire. She said, we win not with size but with truth. Alex tightened a strap and met her gaze. His silence spoke louder than any speech. The warehouse echoed with unity, fragile but unbreakable. The conference hall hummed with tension, as the contract lay between them. Harold Quinn said, "Read every line. Victory is in the details." Maya Reed traced the document with trembling fingers. Victor Hale smirked across the table, waiting for her to falter. The moral compass, Daniel Cross, cleared his throat. He said, "This clause strips your ethics bare. Refuse it." Maya looked at him, eyes blazing. She said, "Then it's no deal." Victor scoffed, leaning back. Noah Park said, "Better to walk away whole than rich and broken." Samuel Price sighed heavily, but his eyes softened with respect. The hall went silent, the choice burning in every breath. The final pitch unfolded under relentless lights, every camera capturing each breath. Maya Reed said, "This brand was built on scars, and scars do not break, they endure." Her voice surged across the hall. Noah Park stood behind her, pride blazing. Grace Reed whispered to herself, "She's more than I ever dreamed." Victor Hale sneered from the front row, jaw tight. Samuel Price leaned forward, captivated. Harold Quinn's eyes glistened, seeing in her the strength he once lost. The crowd erupted, some in applause, some in awe. Maya bowed her head briefly, then lifted her gaze to the storm above. She said, "This is not survival. This is victory." The product launch pulsed with light, every camera fixed on the stage. Maya Reed said, "This is the story of scars turned into strength." Her words wrapped the hall in silence before the crowd roared. Noah Park said, "We did it," his smile wide with pride. Grace Reed whispered from the front row, "She proved me wrong, and I'm glad." Samuel Price nodded slowly, finally convinced. Victor Hale scowled, his grip tightening on the armrest. Harold Quinn leaned on his cane, eyes shining. He said, "She has become what I always hoped she would." The brand was no longer a dream but a force the world could not ignore. After the event, Grace Reed embraced Maya Reed tightly in the quiet corridor. Grace Reed said, "I doubted you, but you built something no one can take away." Maya's voice cracked as she whispered, "Your doubt made me sharper." Noah Park chuckled softly, holding the product box. He said, "The world is finally listening." Samuel Price approached and said, "You've earned more than capital, you've earned respect." Maya nodded, her heart heavy but full. The hallway lights glowed like dawn breaking, soft and certain. Victor Hale stormed into his office, city lights flashing behind glass. He slammed his fist on the desk and said, "This should have been mine." His reflection fractured across the window. Lena Brooks stood stiffly in the corner, regret etched deep. She whispered, "I thought siding with you was survival." Victor sneered, his voice sharp. He said, "Survival is victory, and you failed me." She lowered her head, silent, the weight of betrayal now her burden. The silence in the office was louder than rage. On a quiet balcony, Harold Quinn leaned heavily on his cane as the night air cooled. Harold Quinn said, "I see in you the echoes of my younger self." Maya Reed said, "You taught me to fight with patience." He chuckled softly, his eyes glistening. He said, "No, you taught yourself. I only gave you mirrors." Noah Park stood nearby, silent but smiling, the city glowing around them. Harold's voice grew faint. He said, "Your legacy is yours to write. Mine is watching you succeed." Maya held his hand, gratitude etched deep in her gaze. Maya Reed stood on the rooftop alone, the wind tugging at her hair as the city pulsed below. She whispered, "This is not the end. It's the beginning." The skyline reflected in her eyes like fire and glass. Noah Park's voice echoed in memory. 1 becomes 10, and 10 becomes 100. Grace Reed's words lingered. "You built something no one can take away." Harold Quinn's wisdom remained. Scars prove survival. Maya raised her chin toward the horizon. She said, "Let the world remember, I built this with nothing but belief." The night swallowed her vow, carrying it across the city.